What actually happens when someone says yes? Is it logic? Is it persuasion? Maybe it's something even deeper than that. So today we're going to talk with the man that's negotiated over $1 billion. Yes, you heard me, $1 billion in real estate sales. And he has spent decades studying the quiet psychology behind the moments that people make these really big decisions. Today's guest is John Palumbo, and he's an international speaker, a best-selling author of 15 books he's written. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine 15. And he is what is called the architect of yes. And we're going to learn a little bit about that as well today. So he has, like I said, he has studied for 3 decades the psychology behind connection, behind persuasion, and those subtle little moments when things shift in someone's decision making. So John Palumbo has had his insights in the Wall Street Journal, and he has won from the housing industry, the National Association of Home Builders, the Lifetime Achievement Award. That's a really big deal. So today I want to say welcome, John. I'm so glad you're here today. I can't wait to dive in.
My pleasure. I listened to all that introduction and I kind of scratched my head going, oh my gosh, what do you say to that?
You say, yeah, that's me. I did all that because you have
Been there, done that, right?
been there, done that, got that shirt. That's right. And I want our audience to know that I'm so honored to have him today because he has told me that he's tuning in today with this all the way from Morocco. So I'm excited about that. That is pretty cool. So I've had them from London, England before, but Morocco, no. So thank you for joining us today. So I'm curious, just like everyone else, I'm fascinated with your career and how you've negotiated over $1 billion in real estate transactions, which means you've had the front row seats to some pretty big decision makers. So when you look back at those deals, John, what did you learn about the people who actually make those decisions?
I think the easiest thing to look back on, which is really what I've spent most of my career on, is looking backwards to see what has thrusted me forward. But the decisions, when yes occur, it's really a long time earlier than when the answer comes out of their mouth. The decision was made way, way before the answer came out. And oftentimes we think that we reach a pinnacle, we reach a point in which they just will say yes. But part of it is something that I term as becoming believable. Until you become believable, you're never going to get a yes. And there's a lot of sequence that goes on in what seems like simple conversation, simple meetings, and simply before you even meet somebody, there's so many mechanics that go into place. So, to answer your question, the architect of yes and the architecture of getting to yes is exactly that. There is an architecture. Unless you just want to go around in life and be led around like little lambs being led to slaughter, to take charge, you have to realize that there is an architecture that brings people to the point of agreement with you. Plain and simple.
How does that begin? How does that architecture even begin?
Part of becoming believable is just the aura that you have when you're meeting people. Let me give you an example. I think you know that I do lectures and speaking, and I speak at large conferences. And afterwards, I'll have someone come up to me and they'll say, can you come and talk with our team? And I'll say, I'll be glad to. And they say, we would love to get you in there so that you could help them become better negotiators. Our team is really good at sales, but we need them to be better at negotiating. Ah. And my answer is always this: I'm sorry, I can't help you. And they go, why not? I said, because I don't teach negotiating. And they look at me and they go, well, I thought, and I said, I know what you thought, but I teach unnegotiating skills. And that typically causes them to say, I don't understand. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Would you rather your people and your sales team learn how to be better negotiators, or where that they can negotiate with their clients, or would you rather them influence their way of thinking in order to help them persuade them to spend their money with you? And they'll think for a moment and they'll go, well, isn't it kind of the same? No, it's not. Negotiating And influence and persuasion are two different things.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So with the influence, is it getting them to come to that a decision as if it was their idea in the first place?
Yes. In simple answer. I mean, what's the biggest word in society today that people want to become? Influencers.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what they don't realize is an influencer is only half of the equation. So you hear all these people that I'm an influencer or this person is an influencer. That means they want to change the way people see something. But really, it's the persuaders of the world are the ones that pull the trigger, so to speak, and cause action to happen. So once again, the skills that I write about, talk about, are influence and persuasion. What we want to do in essence is influence their way of thinking, influencers, in order to persuade them to spend their money with us. So influence is half, but persuasion is the other half. And so if you really want to be effective, you want to learn persuasion skills way over the influence.
One comes before the other.
Both work together.
Yeah.
Yes. Both before the other.
So how does that trust and all that play into all of this?
Trust has to be established. And sometimes I've read books and listened to lectures that talk about how it takes a long time, but trust can be established quick. Just a moment ago, I was about to share, and I kind of went off track even for myself. They'll ask me, they say, well, what will you come in and teach us? And I'll say, just one thing. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I said, I'm just going to be able to help your team with one thing, one word, and that is confidence. And sometimes people look at me and go, confidence, that's it? And I go, believe me, whatever time we spend together, all you basically need to be a better communicator is more confidence. And the more confidence you have, the better communicator you become. The better communicator you become, the more easily it is for you to become believable. We don't realize, and a lot of times people don't realize how becoming believable has everything to do with the confidence that you carry with you. And it's as simple as it gets. So in answering your question from a moment ago, what brings on that believability? It's one word, confidence. And I'll tell you where I got that word from. This may go back a little too much in history, but Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, have you ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
He's sort of the godfather of positive thinking. He wrote several books and lectured. He's been gone from the planet for many, many years, but I had the pleasure of meeting him many years ago. And I got to go backstage after one of his talks and meeting. And he said, it's nice to meet you, young man. And he said, what are your plans for, what do you do and what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to be like you, Dr. Peale. I'd like to speak and write books and do audios. And he says, about what? I said, about teaching people how to sell better and do better. And he says, and then what will be your message? And I said, oh, sales and positive thinking. And he says, and I said, like you. And he says, well, what is it you think I do? I said, all of that. And he goes, no, I only do one thing. And I looked and I said, what is that? He said, I deliver confidence. And I said, that's it? He goes, that's it. I deliver confidence. And, that stuck with me and the opportunity to meet him. And I think it has ridden with me through my entire career. And you could reduce it down to that one word through all the books and all the programs that I do is helping people have more confidence in their communication skills. That's what leads to better conversations, better connections, better closings, being able to have people buy from you and be happy they bought from you is the confidence that you bring to them.
And that means you better know your stuff.
So much.
So
And if you don't, learn it quick.
Learn it. Yes.
There's a lot of resources. Even what you're doing right now is a resource to help people. They wouldn't be listening to this if they didn't want to pick up one tiny bit of something. And if they've listened to this far and are listening to you and me talk, they're here for a reason. They're saying, I want to find out, is there a golden bullet here? Is there a golden message coming from this conversation? And I'm sharing with you what I have built my entire career on, the conversation backstage for just a few minutes with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, the godfather of positive thinking. And when he said it's confidence.
That's brilliant. I love that. It's like we should know these things, but we have to be knocked upside the head sometimes to remember. It's just the confidence. I know when I'm dealing with a difficult client in my real estate career, and I do, and it's like, it is harder right now in this world today. It's harder. Real estate is not, I'm not an order taker. I really work with my clients and build those relationships. But sometimes I have to go in there and deliver some hard facts. And it's about me going, and I'm nervous about it because it's not the news they want to hear, but I have to go in there with the facts, the data, and the confidence to deliver the news that they need to hear. So,
It's interesting that you say you're nervous about it, because I'm even gathering something from listening to you talk right now. You can be nervous and still deliver it with confidence. And the client senses that. And the client picks that up through your idiomotions. That means through the way you breathe and the way your eyes are moving and just the simple movements that you make. These idiomotions are picked up subconsciously by your consumer and your clients. And when they do, they can tell, even though they can't describe it, that you might be nervous, but that you're confident in what you're bringing, which builds that believability. And so nervousness has nothing to do with it. Confidence has everything to do with it. And they can sense it and they can feel it because you've been in the business for a while. And regardless of what your message is, you deliver it with confidence. And you just said that. And there's your success right there.
yes, that's great. So you can go in there with all the confidence and you have all the knowledge to deliver your message with confidence. What part does emotion play into all of this?
Emotions of the customers or the emotions of you or the viewers?
Either one. It's just when someone's making a decision, not necessarily the person who's delivering the message, but the person who you have, the client, how does their emotion play into their decisions?
Their emotions play a big part of all decisions. And there's a part of the decision-making process that comes available to all of us if we know how to see it. Each client and each customer will give us exactly the keys that are necessary to unlock the invisible doors of decision, because each consumer will go through different portals in order to reach a decision. Even those people who tend to procrastinate can be convinced that now's the time to move when the doors are unlocked properly. And this is nothing more than architecture of decision making. And so when you're dealing with a customer, their emotions can play such a big part. And there is the observation of the person who's doing the communicating that it may not be time to try to push or put a deal together. And sometimes the simplicity of realizing that will bring a better deal to you or help the deal when it comes together by not thinking, I'm here, I'm now, I've got to put it together. You have to sense their emotions. You have to sense what's going on with them. And you have to be cognitive and aware of it at all times. And sometimes now is not the right time. It is okay to not close a transaction or try to close a transaction when the timing is not right. And I tell this to agents all the time. Hey, sometimes you've got to be able to know when it's right and when it's not.
Yes.
Now, on that same note, let me just say this. Don't use that as an excuse. And a lot of agents will say, here's my card, get back with me. I just didn't want to push them. I didn't feel like they were ready just yet. If they want it, they'll get back with me. Now, that's a totally different ideology. That's them copying out and not doing what they need to do. But knowing when the customer is emotionally not ready is a totally different track to go down.
Yes, exactly. You've got to be able to read them. I've got one right now. I know they're not ready, but we stay in touch. I follow up. I'm Liz. I know when the time will be right, probably in about 2 weeks. But it's been a long process. It's been a process.
Yes, exactly. There is a process there, but a lot of times salespeople will use that process to let them mentally escape why they didn't close a transaction. Most of the time, when a person says, they're interested and they're wanting to do something, it's the salesperson's fault. If there's one line that I hate hearing it's not just real estate, but it's in many businesses, that buyers are liars. And buyers are not liars. It's the salespeople who don't have the confidence to close the transaction. Because when a person is close and when they are ready, they need help crossing that line or crossing the chasm, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And good salespeople do that. Poor salespeople let them escape and go home because they say they want to think about it, they want to pray on it, they want to sleep on it, or any of these other things. And the salespeople go, I understand. When in reality, closing is nothing more than taking all the information they've already given you in the decision-making equations and helping them come to a better conclusion now. And really, it's called accelerating the homebuyer's habit is all we're doing. There's no tricks. There's no maneuvering. There's no manipulation that causes someone to shift and all of a sudden spend $300, $400, $500, $800,000 because you had some trick phrasing to give. If you had that, you don't need to be talking to me. I need to be talking to you and finding out what do you charge for that secret phrase.
Yeah.
There is not one.
No.
And so it's just realizing that you have to be on top of that client when they're ready and not let them escape when they're really ready to buy. They're really ready to buy. And I'll say this. I had a gentleman in a bookstore one time that asked me, he says, well, I've been in business, John, for 60 years, and I'm really good at telling the story. He says, I'm just not good at closing. I'm not good at, getting the commitment. And I said, let me ask you this. Do you take your card at the end of the story and just hand it to your customer and say, if you have any questions, call me? And his wife was right behind him, and she just shook her head like this. Yes, that's what he does. And I said, I'm going to give you a quick lesson of all the books in this bookstore in a 30-second count. I said, next time, instead of giving them your card, I want you to do this. I want you to look them in the eye and simply say, and the next step is. And then he just kind of looked at me and he says, what's the next step? His wife kind of jabbed him and said, it's where you get the money, honey. And he said, oh. And I said, that is correct. The next step is we go ahead and take a deposit. We make a reservation. And I said, what do you think most people think the next step is after you have finished your great storytelling? He said, I don't know. I said, they think the next step is to go home and sleep on it, to go home and think about it.
Yes.
I said, the next step is we go ahead and take a deposit. The next step is we take it off the market. The next step is you move in that direction. Most customers don't really know what the next step is. They're going to leave and go ask somebody else. They're going to say, we just saw a fabulous home, or we just dealt with somebody to purchase something and we really liked it, but we felt like we needed to come home and think about it before we make a decision. No, the decision time was right then and right there. And the salesperson let them escape. So the buyer was not the liar. The salesperson was not the one.
That just happened to me. It wasn't my buyer. I had the seller, and the buyer's agent said, well, they want to go home and sleep on it. I go, oh. No.
That's the agent's fault. That's the agent's fault. And they don't have to push them. Here's the key. If somebody's listening to this right now and they're going, oh, he sounds like one of those pushy guys, I'm not going to push anybody. But if you've done the job right, you have created all the internal engines to cause the urgency to be there at the end of your presentation, if not before. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a great book called The Tipping Point. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it talks about all the moves and all the actions that we take that get us right to the tipping point where they're ready to make a decision, and how so many people abandon right at the tipping point, the moment that it needs to be there. And then his next book after that, which was called Blink, simply talks about how we miss so many opportunities because of simply that, the blink. And so my ideology is not just built on those two books, but those are two great books that help us get to and achieve yes quickly and more often.
Can you share a story of how, I love this, how maybe everything was going right and then all of a sudden you can see that the deal is collapsing, but that there's a way to turn it around?
Try every day. Something collapses in front of us every day. We're going, why me? Why does this have to happen? What have I done to the universe to cause this to happen? And this just goes back to one simple ideology of being in control of where you are and what you're doing. But is there any one specific deal? I guess if I thought about it, I could find them, but I have them happen all the time. But I'm like everybody else. They have them happen all the time too. And we also have those days that everything just seems to fall in place, to fall in
Yeah.
place, to fall in
Love those
place.
days.
That's the day you go to put the toothpaste on your toothbrush and it lands perfectly. It doesn't fall in the sink, and you have to do another string across the brush. And from that moment forward, everything seems to be clicking the rest of the day. And you're
Funny.
thinking, wow. And then we have the other days that literally from the moment we start, it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen. So while there's not a one specific transaction that I can think of, I can tell you that it happens all the time.
Sure
And
does.
the reason the ones completely collapse is because the people are really not in charge and confident with where they see things going. I just say they're not the MacGyvers of the business. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember the TV show MacGyver, but no matter where he was, what imprisonment he had, no matter what jam he got into, he had a way out because he was constantly thinking, and he was always surrounded by the people that said, we're doomed, we're going to die, it's over for us. And he go, wait a minute, I've got one more idea. And that was the salvation of that show, was that he always had one more idea that he was going to project in order to get them out of the collapse of whatever had happened in that episode. And so we face all of those every day, all of us do.
Yeah. You got to turn around those situations. Recently I actually had a situation where I was showing a buyer. I don't usually work with the buyers, but I had a buyer and I knew I wasn't going to get this listing. So when we went there, we met with the homeowner. She hadn't quite signed the papers yet, but I knew it was one of those situations. It was a done deal. I wasn't going to try to persuade her, but I used it to my advantage. I can't believe I'm sharing this, but I am. So I used it to my advantage by asking the homeowners what made their decision to select the other ones, because they had heard my name, but they didn't really know me. So I picked their brain to learn what was it about this team that they chose to list their home. What was it that persuaded them that they were the right ones for them? So it was a learning. So learn from it. You don't get every deal, but learn from it. I learned a lot.
Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, sometimes we learn.
Yeah, I
And
learned.
so the learning is the most important one of all. So
I went home and said, adjust.
well, for me, every situation as a writer, I guess as I've gotten older, every situation turns into I can write an article about that. I can see an
Yes.
insight to that. And there are things that I just didn't see years ago that I see now. The outcomes can be completely different when they're handled properly. And I run into it every day. I had to book some hotel reservations just the other day, and the customer service rep who was working with me online, he says, "Well, I'm not able to book that room." And he says, "But hold on just a second." And he comes back and he goes, "I think I've got it. I just did a workaround." And as I was talking to him, I said, "You know what? It's nice to finally meet a human in the loop here." And he said,
Yeah.
"Pardon me?" I said, "Because that's the kind of people I like to deal with, human in the loops." And he didn't quite understand it. I said, "Well, anybody could have said just a moment ago, 'I'm sorry, the computer won't let me do that.' And I would have been out of my room, and I would not have gotten what I needed, how I needed, and where I wanted to go." And I said, "Instead, you took just a moment to, I'm going to say, hack the system." He says, "Yeah, that's a good description." And he says, "Sometimes you just kind of got to do that to get where you need to go. The computers and all this just don't let you do certain things."
Yeah.
And I said, "Believe me, I know exactly what you're talking about." So becoming the human in the loop is really the key ideology today for me. And that's where I want to be with anybody that I'm talking with, whether it's on the phone, in an email, or on a stage, or even in a live situation where I'm working with somebody one-on-one. I want to be the real human in the loop, because the human in the loop is what brings AI and all these new technologies to life. They can't survive without the human in the loop. The human in the loop has to ignite, has to review, and has to finalize anything that's done by technology today.
Yep.
It
Yep.
still requires a human.
Yes.
So,
Yes. AI. I don't even want to go down that road right now.
okay.
You got so many things. You've written so many books. Is there one? I mean, 15 books, and you're writing another one. Is there one that really is the standout that's relevant to us? Like I know you have one that's called Highly Influential. Is that the one?
Mhm.
You've got so many books. Tell us about some of the books and what was it that inspired you to write those books?
Every book has a story about how it was born and how that book was birthed into the world, so to speak. And I'll just use one quickly here because I know our time is limited, but you had mentioned highly influential and highly persuasive.
Yeah.
And while they both stand independently, highly persuasive was written after highly influential.
Okay.
And I was talking with my daughter one day and something came up and I asked her clearly, I said, you know what it is Dad does? And she goes, yeah, Dad, you go into companies and you talk to them and you give them your opinion on stuff and then they pay you. And I said, well, that's kind of on target, but not totally. And she goes, so what's the difference? And I said, well, first of all, they don't pay me for my opinion because nobody wants my opinion. Do you know why? And she goes, no. I said, because they have their own opinion and I'm not here to change their opinion. And I said, now, what they pay me for is my perspective. And she goes, okay. I said, when you have a rounded perspective and you can see the world clearly now, that you can be paid for. I finished talking with her and I said, your perspective, that's really what I get paid for is my perspective.
Yes.
And so I started writing the book, Highly Persuasive. And if you see the front cover of it, it says the title of the book is Highly Persuasive, Why Your Opinion is Worthless, but Your Perspective is Priceless.
Yes.
Because it's your perspective that you bring to your customers that cause them to change the way they see the world. Your opinion won't change anything. In fact, it causes sometimes people to put their feet into the ground and set it firm and want to remind you why their opinion is worth more than yours. But perspective is a totally different way of approaching things.
I love that.
Because once you help someone change their perspective, they will look at you and they'll say, so, in my opinion, what you're saying is, and I can look back at them and go, I agree with you. I agree with you. And when you can get the customers to say what you need them to about whatever product or service you're trying to help them with, I think you are far further down the road than you ever were when you can simply look at them and say, you're exactly right. And I agree with you.
Yes.
Now you're on the road to persuasion the right way. You've already done the part of influencing, and now the persuasion part comes into play where they're getting ready to spend their money with you. And that's where the architecture of yes has been full circle, has come around because the decisions are made way before they say yes. It's just like when a couple gets married. The marriage is the yes, but the decision was made months and sometimes years earlier to do it. It wasn't until that momentous day that they exchange vows does the yes finally take effect. And in the real world, it's the same thing. Yes is achieved in the consumer's mind way before they tell you. The question is how long will it take you to get that and get that out of them?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I love this. This is brilliant. And we are just about out of time because I could go on for hours listening to you talk about all of this. It's so fascinating. My head is just spinning on some of my clients now. It's like, okay, I'm going to apply this to some of them. It's like, yeah, I've got some meetings coming up. I got to talk to them. So if there's one little golden nugget you want to leave our audience with today, what would that be about the art of negotiating, which we're not talking about negotiating because it's about persuasion and influence. And what's that one little golden nugget you'd like for them to leave with?
You know, there's so many things that we talked about just in the last few minutes, but based on what we just discussed, this would be at the top of my list at this moment in time. The most organic thought would be eliminate the word opinion from your vocabulary. Nobody wants it. Nobody will pay you for it. And most importantly, nobody's interested in hearing your opinion. Now, if you can help them see the world through a different lens and a different perspective, now you're going somewhere. And that doesn't mean you change the word from opinion to perspective. And I've seen people do that. They'll say, oh, I heard your lecture on perspective and influence and persuasion. And now I say to my customers, well, in my perspective, I think we should blah, blah, blah. Well, you haven't done anything. You've just changed the word semantics here. changing the word opinion and getting it out of your vocabulary and learning how to change perspective are two different things. So the nugget here today is get rid of the word opinion and never use it again. And you'll become a far more powerful communicator and a far more powerful person of influence with the people that you deal with every day, 7 days a week.
Gosh, I'm going to use that on my children. I need to use that word. It's like, no, I'm not giving you my mama's opinion. I'm just, yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh. Oh dear. I'll be using that this afternoon on my son.
Well, good. That's the purpose of it. Is hopefully, isn't every interaction and every podcast that you do and every interview, shouldn't somebody walk away with one simple nugget?
Oh, absolutely.
People say you're going to get 10 ideas, you're going to get 1,000 ideas here, but really just one idea is all you need to walk away with to reframe the way we see some things.
Sometimes it's not even a nugget. Sometimes it's a boulder, and I consider that one a boulder.
Good.
I do. It's like, okay, everybody, you're listening. There is no such word as opinion anymore. We're wiping that one from the vocabulary. I will be.
There you go. There you go.
So I have a couple more questions. One is, if our audience would like to connect with you, how can they find you? Where are they going to get in connection with you?
The best business card I ever saw was somebody that handed me their card and it just had their name on it and the word of Google above it. And so then I said, no phone number, no address. And they said, it's all right there. You can Google me and find me. But John Palumbo, PALUMBO.com. It's as simple as that. That's the way people find us today. That's the new phone directory. So you can Google me or you can just look me up. It's very easy. JohnPalumbo.com.
Very good. I always and don't forget, you can go to LinkedIn. There you go. So I have one final question. It is my signature question. I ask every single person because we are all about connections, success through connections. Can you share a story of how an opportunity presented itself to you because of a connection that you had?
This goes back very early in my career when I had been in real estate for a while, and I was with a broker that introduced me to a large developer. I mean, large developer. Like they owned over 100 malls. They had over 20,000 multifamily units. This was a very large developer in the United States. And he was introducing me to them as a potential to work in his brokerage for this company to represent them. And the owner happened to be there, the CEO and owner of the company. And after the meeting, 2 days later, the owner contacted me and said, we'd like to talk to you. I said, well, you'll need to call a broker. And he goes, we're not hiring your broker. And I said, excuse me? They said, hey, he's a great guy, but we want to talk to you about coming to work with us. I said, oh, I wouldn't do that. He's introduced me to you. That's where the connection is. And he goes, okay, well, you can think about it. And I went to the broker that evening and told him, and he was very angry that they wanted to do that. And then after we got past that, he called me the next morning and said, call him back. And I said, well, he says, I can't keep you from this opportunity. This doesn't come along very often. And he says, I know I made the connection, but I sometimes realize that I can't hold you back from this kind of opportunity. So say you got to work for me, he'll just go find another you somewhere else. He's not going to hire our small company. And he says, I realize that. That one connection, that one moment that I got to meet those individuals and they brought me on board with them, this major development changed my career and my life, and ended up working with them for well over 20 years, heading up their multifamily division, high-rise luxury and multifamily developments all over the southeastern United States. And it was a huge career move. But that connection, that moment, those few minutes that I had with them changed my life. And to this day, I have asked very many times, because I'm still in contact with them, even though I'm on my own today, what caused you to just want to literally change your relationship with this broker and reach in and pull me out of there? He said, your confidence. He said, the few minutes that we had with you, the confidence that you had was just something we did not see. And you got to remember, I was a pretty young guy at that point, like 25 years old. So that was extremely young for them. But he said that we just didn't see that in even people that had been with us 10, 20, and 30 years. He said, I never saw that in people. And he said, so that's the reason I reached out to you. So that connection, those just moments, that I had with those people changed my career and changed my life. And it goes back to what we started with. The first thing that we discussed was the one thing you want to carry in your hip pocket at all times is just that confidence in dealing with people and communicating with them.
That's brilliant. All that full circle back to confidence. That's so good. That's so good. Thank you, John, so much for being with us today. I hope everyone here has enjoyed this conversation with John Palumbo. I know I certainly have. And don't forget to hit subscribe or follow wherever you are so you never miss a single episode, because we release one every single week. I'm Zelda Greenberg. I am your host of Success Through Connections. And as you could tell from this conversation, I am a full-time realtor. I help people through their life transitions when they're making those big decisions of when should I move? So if you're in the market for real estate, give me a call. And remember that success does not happen in isolation. It happens because of the connections that we have. Connections are today's currency, and they are today's power move. So keep making those connections, and I'll see you next week with a new episode of Success Through Connections.